Albert Einstein is often quoted as having said, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." The chain reaction of trillions upon trillions of atoms being split within a microsecond unleashes the closest thing to hell that humans have created. Nuclear warfare has seemed to be on our front doorstep since 1962, arguably earlier than that in 1945. And with how prevalent nuclear warfare is, there are countless horrifying representations of such in movies and media, and today we'll be talking about some of the most tragic nuclear war movies. Before we jump into that, thank you all for watching. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, it's good to see you again. Alright. Threads, 1984. Threads is a brutal movie that depicts the havoc effects of a nuke dropping on a civilization through short and long term. And I truly mean brutal. References of suicide, sexual assault, and rape are seen in this movie. I have to talk about some of those moments, so just a heads up now. If you want to skip this part, the time should be on the screen right now. This apocalyptic war movie was directed by Mick Jackson and begins with showing the threat of nuclear warfare and how people would react. We see things like buying out stores, while others think it will never happen. But the horrors of this movie begin when those sirens blare.
I want as soon as you can every single shot. Come on, quick, get down!
Not only are normal people panicked, but so are the ones in charge, showing off how helpless we are if a nuke was ever truly dropped. And inevitably, the bomb drops.
Jesus Christ, they've done it.
Some horrifying moments in this movie include the eeriness in the bomb dropping. Most atomic bomb dropping scenes in movies are horrifying, but this one has a certain eerie nature to it. The pause between explosion to the mushroom cloud, plus the sound design puts this scene above all others in my opinion.
Michael!
The destruction is unforgiving, and you see bodies just melting. After the bomb drops, the movie begins to follow a girl named Ruth, a survivor, as she ventures out of her shelter. She sees burnt corpses as she walks along, and eventually gets to the most terrifying scene to me. When a mother is holding a baby, and the camera gets closer, you see that baby is badly burnt and obviously not alive, explaining the lady's look of trauma. As we follow Ruth, we find out she is pregnant in this fallout. We watch her as she tries to survive with other survivors, getting taken to places like makeshift hospitals, where all they have is salt and water for their radiation sickness. This is where we see true body horror. So if you're squeamish, look away right now or fast forward like 20 seconds. Ruth eventually needs to give birth, but a concern is if the baby will be affected by the radiation. Seeing how earlier we saw Ruth eat a dead sheep, raw. Luckily the baby has no problems. But now Ruth has her and her baby to feed, which is where the movie jumps forward another 10 years. Ruth is on her deathbed, affected by the radiation. She finally rests for the last time, only for her daughter, Jane, to show little reaction, illustrating to us how desensitized she sees the world, or rather how desensitized the world has made her. The movie then follows Jane, as we see her survive through the apocalyptic world that was left for her. We see her with a crew of bandits, seeing how she needs to steal to survive. This is where sexual assault and rape come up, so skip forward 10 seconds if you don't want to hear about it. One of her bandit crew forces himself onto her, and the next time we see Jane, she's pregnant, making her way to a makeshift hospital, where the final scene of horror in this movie is shown. A mutilated stillborn baby is briefly shown, and then handed to the mother, only for the film to end on the mother's horrified reaction. This movie is unforgivably gut-wrenching, but I think it's a perfect movie to show for those who think it would be fun surviving in an apocalypse. When the Wind Blows, 1986. When the Wind Blows is a 1986 animated movie directed by Jimmy Murakami, and it follows the comic book written by Raymond Briggs. The British animated movie follows Hilda and James, an elderly couple, as they try to survive the initial onslaught of a nuclear war. The film is 2D animated, using other forms like a blend of 2D and 3D backgrounds, which helps illustrate the contrast of soft cartoonishly looks to the more disturbing imagery, like when the bomb drops. Plus using elements of stop motion as well. As someone who loves animation, especially the older stuff, this movie's just amazing, although it can feel slow at times. I do highly recommend it, and you can find it on YouTube for free right now. The film's set in a Cold War era. Historically, that time, mass amounts of people were worried about nuclear warfare. Justifiably, I might add, seeing how almost every world power was arming themselves up with nukes and other catastrophic weapons, and the tensions were as high as a high schooler who just found weed.
See that over there? Means this is holy.
When the Wind Blows follows Hilda and James as they live their lives in the UK, as any ordinary retired couple would. They do errands, but mostly keep themselves entertained. Although news reports through the radio indicate an imminent nuclear attack by the Russians will occur, which is why in the first half of the movie we see James taking precautions, instructed by pamphlets that were handed out by the government.
Should be placed at an angle of 60 degrees for maximum strength.
But these pamphlets, as we'll see, truly can't help protect anyone from nuclear warfare. Things like putting doors with pillows at an angle wouldn't stop a havoc a nuke would cause. We know that, but I believe this is where the true horror comes in. Because while we see James and Hilda take precautions that won't change the outcome, they are woefully oblivious to the reality they are in. And that was kind of set in stone because of those pamphlets handed out by the government, which mirror real-life events. The Protect and Survive campaign was created by the British government as a public information campaign for what to do if a nuke was dropped. It ran from 1974 to 1980, and this campaign was more of a peace of mind than anything. For example, as seen in the film, they told people to put doors at an angle with pillows covering it and hide behind those doors, like that's going to stop what a bomb would do.
One idea is to make a lean-to of wood, resting against an inside wall. Strong boards or doors taken from their hinges are quite good. Stop them slipping down the wall by fixing them to the floor with a strip of wood, like this. Then cover the wood with bags or boxes filled with some heavy material, like sand, earth, books, or rolled up clothes.
And that's not to say the British government was stupid, at least for this. But as Eddie in the movie It would say,
"They're gazebos! They're bullshit!"
Plus the idea is shown that this new war is not going to be like the old war. James and Hilda throughout the movie seem to be excited for war. I mean, the UK came out victorious in World War II, so why wouldn't they be? But the film does a great job at illustrating that the mentality of not dead, can't quit isn't enough to face nuclear warfare.
Then the Russians would capitulate and there would be a condition of surrender.
In the film, the bomb eventually drops. Miraculously, James and Hilda survive, and consistently, they are as ignorant as they were before. For example, they wonder why everyday things aren't being done, like deliveries. Or even when the bomb dropped, Hilda remarks she hopes her cake doesn't get burnt in the blast. To the lasting effects of radiation poisoning, they just write it off as being tired or in shock, and that they just need to lie down. Now I do want to point out, there is some dark humor in this movie, and I think it's more British dark humor than American dark humor, so some scenes might seem a little off, but that's why. Throughout the movie, it is obvious that James and Hilda aren't going to have a good ending, through the deterioration shown by the animation, as well as their efforts in their everyday chores. The couple is trying to keep the house clean to hold on to that normal life they once had. But as the film progresses, their health declines and they become more and more bedridden. While we are allowed to look back at this film through different lenses, at the time of the film's release, the threat of nuclear war was as realistic as ever. And When the Wind Blows does an excellent job at showing how doomed we all are if a modern day war were to occur. While this movie may seem slow at points, I highly recommend watching it. Grave of the Fireflies, 1988. Grave of the Fireflies is a 1988 Japanese animated war drama film, written and directed by Isao Takahata. My apologies if I butchered that. It is one of the most beautiful and saddest movies I have ever seen. Set in the city of Kobe, Japan, it tells the story of siblings Saita and Sasuko, as they struggle to survive during the final months of World War II. The story follows Saita and Sasuko Yokokawa, as they have to deal with constant air raids, which kicks off the story as their home gets bombed. Because of the bombing, their mother dies, giving us a first look of how gruesome this animation will get. With their father fighting at war, they get sent to their aunts. However, they leave to live on their own soon after, because the aunt was more focused on keeping supplies to herself rather than them, as well as becoming verbally abusive, which becomes kind of a reoccurring problem. as other civilians, while they still show kindness, are forced to put themselves first before others, which the film perfectly illustrates that they're not bad people, they just need to focus on themselves. But that makes it all the harder for Saita and Sasuko. However, they soon find shelter in an abandoned bunker, where the film is pretty much set after. Saita is the older brother and wishes to be like his father and fight for his country, but since his mother passed, he's focused on his little sister's well-being. Sasuko is a toddler, and I think the film perfectly shows how well Saita is doing, raising her, because Sasuko is acting like a regular toddler in a war-torn city, and the relationship between the two is the brightest part in this whole movie, and with that comes the saddest part in the movie. I highly recommend watching this movie. It's nowhere near as graphic as Threads, although I would say it's almost, even more maybe, devastating. With that being said, spoiler warning now, because I can't really talk further about this movie without spoiling it. If you want to find it, it's kind of hard to find. You'll need to buy or rent it, or you can just Jack Sparrow that bitch. But yeah, end of the spoiler warning. The audience immediately knows Saita doesn't live in the end, as we are shown him dead in the train station. But there was hope throughout the movie that Sasuko would live. And while through the film, Sasuko's health looks to be deteriorating, she doesn't suffer from radiation or other wounds, she's just hungry. And the absolute gut punch comes at the end, when Saita finally gets some food for Sasuko, just for Sasuko to be able to have a little taste of something sweet before going to sleep. And as Saita puts it, and as Saita proceeds to get ready to cremate Sasuko, we see just across the river how close salvation was. As a happy, wealthy family returns home safe and sound, the defeat in Saita's actions afterwards is tragic to see, and I personally think Saita had the means to continue living, however, he had nothing to live for. The ending of the film is quite beautiful though, as we see Saita and Sasuko's spirits, as they sit on a bench, surrounded by fireflies, overlooking modern-day Japan, finally reunited. This film is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, but you'll probably only watch it once. I glossed over a lot of symbolism and just so many things, so I really recommend this film. No one wins in nuclear warfare, and I believe these movies illustrate that perfectly. Here's hoping that our world leaders have seen these movies. If you've seen any of these films, I'd love to hear what you thought about them. If there's other movies like this that I didn't mention, I'd love to hear about them in the comments as well. If you enjoyed this video, a like is always appreciated, and if I earned it, why not subscribe? Alright, bye.